Good morning and welcome to this launch event for the report on Right the Wrongs, Spotlight on the 2020 General Election in Tanzania. My name is Kwamchetsi Makoha. I work for Journalists for Justice, and we are doing this in collaboration with Sauti Kubwa Media. Journalists for Justice works to call out impunity wherever it occurs and to seek justice for victims of atrocity crimes. In the context of the Tanzania election in 2020, various observers and human rights groups called out various violations that have occurred in the context of that election. We went back to investigate and to deepen that knowledge, and it's on that basis that today's report is produced. Before I begin, I would just like to lay the context. And the context of this report is the Tanzania Constitution. Tanzania itself acknowledges the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. In its constitution, it pledges to be a humane society. So it is on that basis that this inquiry, this investigation, this monitoring report attempts to hold the Tanzanian authority to account. So this is an accountability conversation. I don't want to take too much time. We have an array of human rights leaders and activists lined up to speak to this report. But my role, therefore, is just to make sure that the conversation occurs. Please use the chat box on the messaging so that we are able to keep this conversation as robust as possible. We will keep monitoring and making sure that we feedback. At this moment, I would like to invite my co-host, who is the head of Sauti Kubwa Media, who are co-publishing this report. My colleague, my brother, Ndugu Ansbert Ngurumo.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Kwam?
We can hear you, Ansbert.
Thank you. Our fellow Tanzanians, human rights defenders, members of the media present in this occasion, good morning. I'm speaking on behalf of SK Media and, of course, our colleagues, Journalists for Justice. These two media organizations teamed up to undertake a very noble duty to investigate, document, and report the incidents of human rights abuses that marred the Tanzania general election in 2020. But the devotion to do this investigation emanated from the rampant abuses that had been reported to have characterized the entire election process. So between June 2021 and April 2022, we embarked on the exercise that involved 32 monitors across 25 of 31 regions of Tanzania. And we came out with damning evidences that show how the Tanzania 2020 general election falls short of being called free and fair in many aspects. As the report attests, you will see the details of the report. The killings, the tortures, the arbitrary arrests, the detention, and deliberate disenfranchisement of citizens from participating in the election process. All these ills set the 2020 general election as a failed exercise. So, although Tanzania had witnessed some pockets of human rights violations in previous elections, apart from the 2000 general election in Zanzibar, of course, the 2020 general election that happened can be mentioned as a shame to a country that has always portrayed itself as a beacon of peace and champion of democracy. So when we took up this role, we wanted to address these issues, to uncover them and put them in the public space. Although the actual collection of the evidence occurred about 7 months, in fact, after the election day, indeed, there is enough evidence in this report to conclude that the over-deployment of security forces all along during the process of nomination of candidates, during campaign, during the voting day, and the results announcement sends a clear message to the general public that the 2020 general election was not about seeking public mandate. Instead, it is viewed as it sought to justify an already made decision by those in power to remain in office at all costs by abusing, and I underline the term abuse, by abusing security forces. So many gross human rights violations were documented in at least 17 of the 31 regions of Tanzania. Just to mention some, in Zanzibar, Pemba, Njombe, Morogoro, Arusha, Kilimanjaro, Kigoma, Songwe, Simiyu, Mwanza, Tanzania, and Tabora, Dar es Salaam, Rukwa, Ruvuma, Mara, and coast regions. But the key among them were the killings, the torture, arbitrary arrests, detention and abduction, unfair arrest and charging of parliamentary and councillorship candidates, party leaders, as well as members and supporters with criminal offenses that cannot be bailed, disenfranchising eligible voters, and the absence of the opportunity to seek and obtain redress of violations of these rights. So looking back retrospectively, one may understand the motive behind the government's decision to refuse both national and international election observers. And with such a refusal, of course, all election malpractices would be least exposed to Tanzanians and to the world. Although some of the documented incidents may seem to be shocking news to many, one must be cognizant of the fact that the early warning signs of similar abuses also characterized the 2019 civic election, which almost saw all candidates from the opposition parties being disenfranchised by the government officials entrusted to supervise the election. As stated above, the red flag of early signs of election mismanagement went up during the 2019 civic election. Unfortunately, however, the civic societies failed to grasp the opportunity to prepare a fallback plan that would have enabled them to monitor the 2020 general election creatively and effectively. It is therefore imperative to build and beef up the international coalition in dealing with circumstances like that of 2020 in order to bring to justice all perpetrators of human rights abuses, whether they're personal or the organizational or state machinery capacity. Nevertheless, we believe it is not yet late to bring to justice all perpetrators of human rights abuses related to the 2020 general election in Tanzania. It is our sincere hope that this report will be an eye-opener for that course of action. And that is why the report itself bears the title, Right the Wrongs, in order to stop these human rights violations and malpractices from happening again. And we call upon all Tanzanians, particularly President Samia Suluhu Hassan, President Hussein Mwinyi, and all electoral and security bodies in Tanzania to right the wrongs and set a new president now. A new president now of righting the wrongs. Thank you so much for listening to me.
But we can't hear you. Ansbat?
You can't hear me?
We can hear you now. Please proceed. We lost you for about a minute there, but please proceed.
I'm saying I was closing with the remarks that call upon Tanzanians, and particularly the president of Tanzania and the president of Zanzibar, and all bodies of the electoral bodies and security bodies in Tanzania, to make sure that they read this report, and after reading the report, they make sure that they correct the wrongs that were committed in the past, so as to set a new precedent now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ansbat, for that sort of capsule description of the report and what we are doing. We want to move on so that we are also able to catch on with time. And we wanted to get a perspective of what happened in Zanzibar. The perspective from Zanzibar is extremely important because a lot of the violations seem to have occurred in Zanzibar. The person who's going to give us that perspective is a renowned Zanzibari politician. His name is Ismail Jussa. He's currently serving as a member of the Central Committee of the Alliance for Change and Transparency, ACT Wazalendo, the leading opposition party in Zanzibar and the second largest opposition party in mainland Tanzania. He was a member of the House of Representatives in Zanzibar, representing Stone Town, and also served as a member of parliament of the United Republic of Tanzania. He began his long political career as an activist, campaigning for introduction of multi-party democracy in 1989, and was one of the founders of the Civic United Front, CUF, in 1992. He served in the party in different capacities, including those of Deputy Secretary General, Director of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, Deputy Director of Foreign Affairs and Human Rights, Commissioner at the Joint Presidential Supervisory Commission, Secretary set up to oversee the implementation of the political accord between CCM and CUF, Muafaka, Private Secretary to the Secretary General and Secretary to the Shadow Cabinet. Outside politics, Mr. Jussa founded a media company called Zanzibar International Media Limited in 2002, which published a weekly newspaper called Dira. He's also one of the 6 founders of the Maalim Seif Foundation, which was established last year to carry on the legacy of the late Maalim Seif Sharif Hamad and to popularize his values and ideals in the areas of democracy, human rights, justice, and rule of law through dialogue and diplomacy. Ismail Jussa was born and raised in Zanzibar and holds a bachelor's degree in law from the University of Hull in the United Kingdom. Mheshimiwa, karibu sana.
Asante sana. Asante sana. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be one of the panelists. And secondly, I would like to express my appreciation for the efforts done to be able to compile this evidence about what transpired in Zanzibar and Tanzania during 2020, and finally to come up with this wonderful report that I myself have been able to go through. Well, Zanzibar is not new to human rights violations and election violence. And it is protracted history from the very first multi-party elections in 1995. But things had improved in 2010 elections and 2015 elections following an agreement or reconciliation agreement that was reached between the former president of Zanzibar, Dr. Amani Karume, and the then Secretary General of the Civic United Front, Maalim Seif Sharif Hamad. And of course, there has been many agreements before, which resulted into some gradual reforms in the Zanzibar electoral laws and other laws governing democracy, human rights, and the provision or rule of law in general. But the situation in 2020 was very bad, actually, maybe compared to all it was the worst, maybe compared to all the previous elections. As Asbat was saying, we had witnessed killings in 2001, following another disputed elections in 2000, and almost 45 people were killed in Zanzibar. But in between, with the gains that were made during the various political accords, things had improved. But 2020 was very different. Now, before I speak about the Zanzibar experience and the contents of the report with regard to Zanzibar, I'd like to mention one thing, and that is what we call in Zanzibar the union factor in Zanzibar politics. It has been a trend that in all our elections, we have been witnessing the deployment of army from mainland to come to Zanzibar to make sure that whoever is decided by the mainland to be the president of Zanzibar is imposed, even if it means major violations of human rights and even killings of people. And that has been happening in many elections. But in 2020, it was worse because of the Magufuli factor as well. It was known that even within his own party, there were problems in accepting who should be their candidate. And Magufuli made sure that his personal choice of who should become the president of Zanzibar would be imposed no matter what. And that saw an increasing and maybe unprecedented big number of army personnel and equipment from the mainland to come to Zanzibar. And it was common to see during election time, during campaign meetings and other activities, to see even war tanks roaming around the streets of narrow streets of Zanzibar in order to intimidate people. But the situation was visible from the very beginning that the elections won't be anywhere near any credible elections. We witnessed, for example, this disenfranchisement of thousands of voters of Zanzibar simply because the local government headmen that are called the shehas would deny that they are not eligible to be registered of voters. But also the disqualification of candidates of the opposition. We witnessed our own candidates from ACT Wazalendo, which is the main opposition party in Zanzibar. At least 14 candidates from the for the union parliamentary elections and another 14 for the Zanzibar House of Representatives who are disqualified, and therefore that meant the CCM candidates were elected or were declared to be elected unopposed, which was not the case if a law was really followed. But also we witnessed the disruption of campaign rallies. There was a time, just like the mainland, our presidential candidate was barred from continuing with his presidential campaign simply because the ruling party's candidate could not cope with the campaign trail. In order to be able to balance that, they made sure that our side, our candidate will be barred from continuing with his campaigns. But there was a particular thing that was also enacted in between 2016 to 2020, in the amendment of the Elections Act of Zanzibar, which was to introduce something they called early voting. And therefore, there were 2 days of elections, one specifically designated for the Zanzibar Special Security Forces, but we believed it was done purposely in order to enable them to vote more than once, to be able to vote on the day where agents from the opposition parties would be hardly be allowed to monitor the process. And after that, there were no any arrangements for the party agents to be able to accompany the ballot boxes, and nobody knew where they were kept. They were just opened on the second day of the vote, and all the ballots, no matter who voted, and we couldn't tell who actually voted and who did not, were just removed from those ballot boxes and added to those ballot boxes that were earmarked for the second day, which was the actual polling day in the country. And there were protests because of this early voting, and that's where actually the killings started, especially in Pemba. So having said that, the report, I'm happy that it has documented these killings, and the section on Zanzibar contains pictures, hospital and medical reports, the police documents. But all in all, what we have been able to collect from our own side is far beyond, far more than what is contained in the report. All in all, what we know is that at least 21 people were killed in Zanzibar alone, from 27th to 29th. Our own count has it that at least 17 people were killed in Pemba and 4 in the main island of Unguja. But also there were beatings, many people were injured. I myself actually is one of those victims of police brutality. I was severely beaten and I had my leg and my shoulder broken. Actually, I had to be transferred to Nairobi for medical treatment. So it is really a welcoming move to see that while these issues have been denied by the regime, both in Zanzibar and the union government, to see human rights organizations and other activists taking the bold move to be able to investigate and put on record all these violations is a welcome move. I believe it will continue to put pressure on the regime to end the culture of impunity that has been a hallmark of Zanzibar multi-party history from 1992 to date. And we on our side, actually, the Institute of Zalendo, when we decided to join again the government of national unity in Zanzibar, had put a condition that action should be taken against those culprits who are responsible for the killings and other human rights violations. And our first vice president actually recently submitted a report to the president of Zanzibar, which among other things, it calls for legal and other action to be taken against those who are responsible for those serious human rights violations. So I believe this report will really help us to put forward the case. Earlier, we had a report from Human Rights Watch, which was also assisted by Amnesty International. And now this report entitled Right of the Wrongs, I believe it will go a long way in pushing for justice to be done against the victims of the human rights violation that were witnessed in 2020 elections. And just like what Asmat did, let me end by again calling for the regime, both at the union level and in Zanzibar, to now actually end this history of a vicious cycle of violence in both Zanzibar, and now it is also spreading on the mainland, by instituting radical reforms in our constitutional regime, in our legal regime, in other laws governing human rights situation, state organs reforms, especially police and other security forces, in order to ensure that the forthcoming 2025 elections and other subsequent elections will be free of violence, and that people could freely and democratically express their will through the ballot without any fear of losing their lives or being left without some of their limbs, simply because they wanted to exercise their democratic rights. Thank you very much.
And also thank you very much for providing a very rich context to explain the report. We had our limitations as organizations in terms of being able to reach all the victims. But as you rightly put out, yes, the numbers that came out of Tanzania was Zanzibar were 21 dead, and we were only able to just reach a few of those to interview them. And also just the fact that the issue around early voting and the discrepancies around people not being able to join the permanent national voter register was significant enough in Tanzania, because it denied people the right to suffrage, which is guaranteed in the Constitution. Now, at this point, I probably would just like to shift gears a little. And in shifting gears in that direction, I would like, first of all, to say that Tanzania has had a very difficult relationship with the media. It has a proliferation of many newspapers, many TV and radio stations, yes, but their freedom to operate has not always been guaranteed. But in the context of the 2020 elections, it seemed to actually move from bad to worse. I am going to invite the next panelist, which is Dr. Ananilea Nkia, to speak to issues about freedom of expression and freedom of the media in Tanzania. Dr. Nkia is a senior media expert, researcher, creative public speaker, seasoned writer of news stories on development, human rights, and political issues. She is a graduate of the University of Bradford in the United Kingdom, where she obtained her PhD. She served as the executive director of the Tanzania Media Women's Association, TAMWA, for a period running from 2001 to 2012, so almost 11 years. Dr. Nkia is a renowned and well-decorated advocate for women and children's rights. She has been a leading advocate for women's advancement through an awareness raising and judicial reform. She was awarded by the US Embassy in Tanzania the Tanzania Woman of Courage Award of 2010 for her continuous commitment and resilience in efforts to promote women and children's rights. Daktari, please speak to us about the situation of media freedom of expression in the context of the 2020 elections. Karibu.
Thank you very much. Because of the location where I am now, I don't think I'm saying thank you very much for inviting me to speak in this important meeting. But because of the location where I am in the village, and the performance of the network, I think I would ask you to allow me to speak, but not put on the video. Is that all right?
That's okay, Daktari. Endelea.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's
all right.
Great. Yes.
Okay.
Please go on.
I would like to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to speak in this very important occasion of launching the report on the rights and wrongs of the 2020 general elections in Tanzania. Secondly, I would like to commend Sauti Kubwa and Journalists for Justice for their great job that made this report a reality today. And I think it's very, very important time, because it is ahead of 2 or 3 years to the next general election in Tanzania. I'm impressed by the way, the kind of recommendation the report came out with, and the way the recommendations have been presented. They are smart because they are targeting individual actors one by one. The President of the United Republic of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of Zanzibar, the Parliament of Tanzania, and the rest. And so I think they are very smart. You can actually measure the action. That's what I think is important. And so I was told to speak about suppression of freedom of expression in Tanzania during the general election. But before I go into that, I would like to say, for those people who don't know the importance of the media, to speak a bit of it and say why media is important in any society. For me, I believe media is an important player in generation, documentation, and the dissemination of information within the society. Media also plays the critical role in the promotion of social change, democratic processes, and the social accountability mechanism. On the other hand, media enables the voice of various sections in the society, and actually even individuals. And during election, the voice of the candidates, the voice of the people to be heard, and their consent to be considered and acted upon in time. If there is no media to actually collect information and disseminate about those actions, violation of human rights during elections, then the society end up to be in darkness. And as a result, you cannot expect election to be free, fair, and credible. So known as fourth estate, the media works as the watchdog, the oversight, they become the oversight part of the election because their role, because of that, their role enhances accountability and transparency in the election. But also during the election, media is an important part because it becomes part and parcel of checks and balance to ensure the election, the conduct of every part enables the election to become free, fair, and credible. But for media to be able to do that, it has to be independent, objective, and also media have to be really free of fear. Because media which is free out of fear becomes a key connectivity tissue to the free and fair election. But regarding the election, also, the principal means through which a citizen get information about during the election, I would like to say that citizens expect the media to provide them with important information about voters registration, nomination of the candidates, campaigns, what are the campaign issues, who are the candidates from different parties, and then location of the polling stations, because if the citizens do not know where they are the polling stations, they might not be able to actually vote. They have also to provide information about during the polling day, what is happening during that specific and a very important day. And then the general media also has to provide the general public objective information about counting of the votes and announcing of the winners. Any interference in that operation day may lead to deny the citizens the right to information, and very important information which enables them to make informed decision about the candidates, which are very important, which is very important in terms of actually deciding on the future of their country. But during the 2020 general election in Tanzania, media freedom was highly compromised. Some media that were, for example, pro-opposition, such as Tanzania Daima newspaper, were shut down ahead of the election. And then on polling day, the regime because as you know, in this contemporary time, many people across the world and in Tanzania rely on social media. And in Tanzania, it's very important because actually the mainstream media, actually, they have a lot of fear. Even social media have a lot of fear because of this, the laws which have been established. Like, for example, the cybercrime of 2015. So on the polling day, the regime clamped down the internet and social media apps, which had been the people's main source of information. These actually source of these apps were deactivated. For example, the Twitter was disabled in Tanzania, and many people who are critical, and the media people who actually, if they are not able to disseminate information through their mainstream media, they would use Twitter, because Twitter is where the officials, government officials, learned people are able to actually read the critical and actually important information. So a few weeks before the elections, these apps were disabled to deny the public quick access to information from the polling stations. On the day of, actually on the day of polling, the apps for this social media were actually disabled. The Tanzanian Broadcast Corporation, compromised state media, became the only available channel of information about the election. This, in my view, was really denying the right of information, suppression of freedom of expression, and as a result, many irregularities happened during that election. Election was really not an election because it's like the Tanzanians were denied their right, the right to actually exercise their election kind of power. They were not able to follow what is happening. And as a result, at the end, it was like a chaos. And what we can see today is the kind of government of a single party in the context of multi-party democracy in Tanzania. But I believe, if media were free, objective, if the media were independent, if the social media were not interfered and disabled, the result of that election would have been very different today. So that is all I can say about this. And for this 10 minutes I've been given. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daktari. You've done very, very well, despite being in a village with low connectivity. And I think there are very important points that you bring out. The most significant is that media are critical in the delivery of a free, fair, and credible election. The fact that the Tanzania media was so severely constrained, first of all, in itself casts a shadow on the electoral process itself. But the fact that it took, if you like, alternative media organizations such as Sauti Kubwa and Journalists for Justice to mobilize this report speaks to a significant gap, because if media were actually operating as they normally would, these human rights violations would not have taken a year, 2 years to be able to document. And so I thank you very much. I thank you very much for your remarks that contextualize the work that we are undertaking here today. I would like to move on. Thank you very much. I hope you stay on so that you are able to engage our other people who are participating online.
Yes, I'm following you. Yeah, thank you.
If you're participating online, please feel free to type in your questions, and then we will share them with the panelists so that at the end they are able to comment. I would like now to move on, and of course, looking at the time, I would like to now move on and ask our third venerable speaker, Dr. Helen Kijo Bisimba. Dr. Bisimba is one of the most prolific human rights defenders in Tanzania. She identifies as a teacher as well as a lawyer. She has a PhD, it's a philosopher's degree in law from the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom, awarded in 2012. She was the executive director of the Legal and Human Rights Center, a renowned human rights NGO in Tanzania for 22 years, where she retired in June 2018. For over 30 years, Dr. Bisimba has been involved in social justice work, specifically on governance, gender advocacy research. She has led several governance reform initiatives, as well as the conceptualization and implementation of programs, which included awareness creation, legal aid, human rights monitoring, including observing elections in Tanzania and other African countries, as well as issuing human rights situation reports. We are looking to you, Daktari, to speak to us about the human rights implications of the 2020 general election in Tanzania. Please, you have the floor. Karibu.
Thank you, asante sana. Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to begin by thanking so much the organizers of this meeting, Sauti Kubwa and the Journalists for Justice. And thank you for all the presenters, because they've given us a very good information about what happened in the general election of 2020. I'll try to see if I can talk something about the implication of human rights in such a situation. As you might know, election is a democratic undertaking. And so when we're talking about democracy and human rights can be said to be the two coins, two sides of the same coin. So you cannot have, say you are democratic, but you are not observing human rights and vice versa. Democracy is supposed to provide an environment that respects human rights and fundamental freedoms. As you might know, in a democracy, the free will of the people is exposed or is expressed. All people in a democracy has a say in decisions through their vote, and the vote is to put and hold to account decision makers. And also in a democracy, everyone has a right to vie for any post he wants or she wants. So that's why we're talking about freedom to be in a democratic processes. And also we talk about fairness to that undertaking. Human rights cannot be fully implemented, or they cannot thrive if the political and legal systems are not democratic. Every human being participating in the decision-making processes is supposed to be protected by human rights. Otherwise, it can be very, very difficult. Holding periodic and genuine elections by universal suffrage is an essential element of a democracy. This, we can say that these are the values which are embodied in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and developed in the Civil and Political Rights Covenant, where transparency, accountability are talked about during elections. In an election, we are expected, or an election is said to be free, and it is said to be fair, where people involved have to be free to participate. And this is possible where they have no fear of losing their life or their right to life. They've got no fear of being tortured or any inhuman and degrading treatment. They have no fear that they cannot move from one place to another. They are free to move. They are free to assemble. Their dignity is upheld, and they are aware of what they are doing as in the report, I saw some people saying that there was a report which was saying that people are not aware of their rights, or they are not aware of how they are supposed to vote. And this is a problem because people are supposed to be made aware before the process begins so that they can know where they are, what they are doing, how they are going to do it, and so forth and so on. And I remember there are times when people are being misinformed on the electoral process, they're being misinformed. And that is a very, very a bad thing during elections. Or some of them are not being misinformed, but they are not, people are not allowed to provide voter education during the voting processes. So if they, and also in a democracy, and if we have to observe human rights, there have to be, if anybody is not agreeing or got any problem, abuse or so forth, they need to have a remedy. They have to have a remedy, and this remedy can be provided in a free justice system. Without a free justice system, it becomes very, very difficult. And that's why you see in the 2020 elections, although there were so many disagreements, but I don't think there was anybody who went to court to ask for any remedy because they are not trusting the courts, which is also very, very bad when there's no trust to the justice system. The human rights bodies also, we have human rights bodies, like in Tanzania, we have the National Human Rights Commission, the Commission for Human Rights and Good Governance, but also this one, which is supposed to intervene when there are problems such as those. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. But also we have the African Commission for Human Rights, which I don't know if we did anything after that. Also we have the international one. All these instruments or bodies are supposed to intervene when things are not working. So what happened in 2020 in Tanzania would have expected the justice systems to work, the human rights bodies to work, but they didn't do anything. So it became like it was an impunity, and impunity is not acceptable, as this might lead to chaos in the country. And we cannot claim to be a peaceful country while people are not free to participate in very crucial activities like elections, because the elections are so important because they help people to choose their leaders to ensure that their governance system is working. So when things are not well and it is left like that, it becomes very, very difficult. I went through the recommendations which were made in the report, and I find that the recommendations are they are very, very good. As Analia said, they are good in that they have given everybody something to do. And if the recommendations are to be followed as they are supposed to, I think maybe we can rectify what had happened, because when wrongs are done, we cannot just sit and say that it is let bygones go. We have to follow up to ensure that these things do not happen again, because human rights are so important in our lives as human beings, but also democracy is so important because it guides us as we move in our daily lives. So in the recommendations, for example, I've seen the president of Tanzania, Madam Samia Suluhu Hassan, has appointed a task force, and the task force is said to be a task force for multi-party democracy. If this task force is to really work, it has to go, for example, in this report and see what is proposed. But also there are people who are going to that task force. They also, I think, raise issues. So if these issues are raised and the task force is serious, they have to see the recommendation and ensure that we follow some path where people will be reconciled, because there's a human beings. When people are not happy, when people are not aggrieved, they have to see a remedy. Without a remedy, it becomes very, very difficult to continue with our lives. But we need to do something, excuse me, which will make sure that we are reconciled, because what happened in 2020 in human rights abuse, people being killed, people being tortured, people being, a lot of very, very sad and bad things as the report shows, and the report is just a small amount because you see only 59 people were interviewed. If we had interviewed more people, we could have found a lot more of what happened. And even after that, the election, so many things happened and which need to be rectified. And they can be rectified where we have a political will to do so. Otherwise, we might go back to such things, which in the end, it will bring us a big problem in the country, which we normally claim that it is a peaceful country, and it might be, instead of a peaceful of PAC, it can be peaceful of PICE. Yeah, I think I'll leave it to it now. Thank you.
And I mean, I love the way you framed this conversation, because this conversation has a dichotomy. It has a dichotomy between rights holders and duty bearers. And the language that you bring to this conversation is very useful, because there are duty bearers and there are rights holders. And the fact that also there is a task force and the opportunity that exists for this report to feed into that task force. I acknowledge with deep gratitude what you have said, which is that the climate of fear also made it very difficult for people to speak out, even for victims to speak out. So this report is in no way a conclusive or comprehensive record, but it's only a tip of the iceberg in terms of what people were able or had the courage to come forward to speak out. We are trying to get to our keynote speaker, but we are having some challenges around that. So as we wait, I would like to see if there are any people who would like to raise questions or make comments, and then we will be able to deal with that and have our panelists respond to them. Yeah, if you can kindly raise your hand, there's a facility for raising your hand. If you raise your hand, we'll be able to recognize you and give you an opportunity to speak. So as you're waiting to just organize that, yeah, okay.
I wanted to add on.
Yes, please. Yes, please go on, and then the question can come.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that during general elections in Tanzania, actually, objective reporting was a scanty commodity. Reporting both private and state media was in favor of the regime. And it's like there was no, although in Tanzania since 1992, there was freedom of media, that private media were allowed, and there are so many media in Tanzania today which are called the private media. But in reality, in terms of the information during the election, it's like all the media, because of the fear which had been instilled in the media during the regime, the information that each media would actually put on air or publish, it was in favor of the regime. So the general population did not actually get election reporting that would have emanated from objective, independent, and authentic journalism. It's like journalism was dead, total dead. It was only the voice and the information that actually will actually favor the regime that will be coming out. So it was not good at all in terms of election. If election is to enable the people to get right information, important information, for them to be able to make informed decision on the election day. In Tanzania, it was a very different case. So I'm expecting that the coming general election, the President Samia Suluhu Hassan will actually ensure that the media is free so that journalists are able to do objective reporting for the general population to be able to get critical information, important information, for them to make informed decision on who is the right candidate to be elected at different levels, be at president's level, at parliamentary level, at the council level. Otherwise, Tanzania will continue to be a poor country, because if we all believe that leaders are supposed to be number one resource for national development, if elections are just done because to consider the country is democratic, if it continues like this in Tanzania, it is the actual waste of resources, because the people are not given the mandate to be able to elect the candidates they want them to be their leaders. And if the media freedom is curtailed, then the people cannot get important information for them to make informed decision who is the right candidate to be given the votes to become the leader of their localities, their country, and for their whatever they want, member of parliament. So this is very important. And I'm urging Samia Suluhu Hassan and Hussein Mwinyi in Zanzibar to take this report as very, very important report for them to implement the recommendation put in therein. Thank you.
If Kaiser, you're ready, please go up with your question or comment. Please unmute and go ahead. We can't hear you. Can we move to the next person? I can see Neville Mina. If you could just vocalize the question I've seen in the chat. Please allow her. We seem to be having audio challenges. Please unmute. When you are given the opportunity to speak, please unmute your microphone. And please indicate if you'd like to speak by raising your hand. There's a facility at the bottom of your screen with a raised hand. If you click on that, we'll be able to see that you'd like to speak. Anyone who's ready? Between Kaiser and Mina?
Hello?
Yeah. Yes, Kaiser, go ahead.
Hello?
Please go ahead, we can hear you.
Thank you, moderator. I just have two questions. May I first also join others by thanking the organizer of this launch of this report and for comparing the report as well. I have two questions, and they're going to a presentation or a comment made by Jusa in Zanzibar. The one is about he noted in the presentation that Magufuli, the late Magufuli, had a choice of a president for Zanzibar, which was may not have been the similar choice of other system stalwarts. I just wanted to know if he happened to know the name of whom was a choice of how many contested, where the contestation was in terms of other than the the current president, then whom was the choice of other, perhaps because what we knew was the only current president that was whose name was floated to the public. So if that other name of other names of those who are contesting but could not be given the chance to contest the elections in Zanzibar for the presidency, I would rather wanted to hear if this name is those names are available or can mention them in public, or it was just a rumor. And two, also he mentioned that there was the belief, or so to say, or that the opposition Zanzibar, after forming the current revolutionary government of Zanzibar, they were of the hope that those who violated human rights during elections in Zanzibar would be booked, would be taken to face the law. And I am not sure if anything has been done, but would like to get the status of so far how much this has been pursued by the government. Because my understanding, those who do it, they are always in impunity. They are protected. And if you can go into the 2019 elections, the local government elections, there were even a provision in the regulations that those who do mislead during the conduct of the elections, I mean those government officials, will not be held responsible. That was the protection before even they committed those irregularities. So I don't just know in Zanzibar if there has been anything done to book those who violated or committed human rights violation during elections. Thank you.
I think you asked an important question there about impunity, the culture of impunity, and if there were other candidates in the Zanzibar election other than Mwinyi. I also see a question from Neville Mina for Dr. Nkia, which is, I think she's asking for specific steps that you think the president should take to ensure there is freedom of the press and freedom of the media. Are there any others, or do we want to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Somebody else wants to speak up.
Okay. Yeah. I have two questions to add, and this one, apart from that which I was asked to Dr. Nanlea, I think you have just mentioned it clearly, so I think she got it. My second question goes to Ismail Jussa in Zanzibar.
What is my question, please?
Nanlea, my question is, you have just called upon the president to make sure that the freedom of the press is restored. So my question is, how do you think this must be done? Okay. The second question goes to Mr. Jussa. Mr. Jussa, you have just called upon the government to make sure that call for justice, and the justice for those who are victims to be compensated, and secondly, for the wrongdoers maybe to be punished or at least denounced. And as far as I know, is that ACT Wazalendo is the part of governance or government in the islands. That means that you have the national, we have the government of national unity, GNU, government of national unity, if I'm not mistaken, if I got it right. So what is your role? I don't know if with your position, on your position, you can say this. What is your role to make these things happen? Justice for all, denouncing or held responsible for those who were the wrongdoers because they are known, and secondly, to compensate for those who are victims of the election violence. I think, thank you. That's what I have.
Okay. I
I'm
think, yes, thank you very much. I also see Musa. Musa, do you want to speak up? I see you have a question for Honorable Jusa. Swali, how unaonaje serikali ya umoja wa kitaifa Zanzibar ikifanya kazi? You want to, unataka kuuliza, unajua Kiswahili changu ni kibovu, mimi ni Mkenya. Wakenya hawajui Kiswahili kabisa.
Unajua.
Haya, uliza swali lako tafadhali.
Nadhani iko vizuri. Nitaka tu nijue how anaionaje serikali ya umoja wa kitaifa Zanzibar inafanya vizuri kutimiza yale ambayo walikusudiwa kuundwa kwake. Yani community, yani wananchi wanaionaje na yeye mwenyewe anaionaje? Inafanya vizuri au bado kuna problem? Thank you.
Shukrani. Sasa tuanze na nani? I think we'll start with Dr. Nkia, who has questions, you respond, and then we come to Dr. Bisimba, and then we come to Mheshimiwa Jusa, who hopefully will also close the session because we are not able to get Daktari.
Can you hear me?
Can Daktari endelea?
Yeah, the recommendation I'm talking about, which President Samia needs to actually work on immediately or before 2025 election, are actually in the report. Let me read them for those who have not seen the report. The one is ensure the urgent repeal and the review of all repressive laws and regulations to bring them into conformity with Tanzania's constitution and the international human rights obligation and commitments. In relation to the media, for example, there's this Cybercrime Act of 2015. Actually, it is the one which was used actually to clamp down all the apps of social media, and the people were not able to follow the polling, what was happening in the polling station during the election day. There's another one which is in the report, it says this illegal basis for the human rights violation documented in this report, and immediately commit to ensure independent and impartial investigation into violation and any other cases where there is reasonable ground to believe that human rights violations were committed. The third one is President Samia Suluhu needs to commit to taking the necessary measures to guarantee free and fair election, including the Independent Electoral Commission, as recommended in various reports, including the next one on report, as well as the July 2020 ruling of the African Court of Human and People's Rights on the right to challenge election results, as well as ongoing cases at the court. I hope all of us will know this. And the fourth one, President Samia needs to invite and collaborate with human rights monitors and mechanism, including the African Commission and the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, to independently investigate the human rights situation in Tanzania in order to remedy the prevailing situation to avoid further violence, conflict in the future and in the coming general election 2025. The fifth one, action which is President Samia Suluhu Hassan need to work on, is to guarantee the impartial participation of the security forces in the future election, guided by a strict code of conduct and ethics. As you hear people who spoke about what actually Anspet Ngurumo said, there was a lot of violence, violation of human rights, abuse of human rights by killing people in the election, during the election. So I think this is very important point, action Samia Suluhu needs to take upon to make sure that what actually happened in the general election 2020 should never happen in the future. In relation to the media, Samia Suluhu should make sure that she needs to make sure that no violation of information dissemination happen during the election in the coming general election. For example, no one, her regime should not tamper with actually social media apps, because during the 2020 general election, we noted that the regime clamped down on the internet and the social media apps, which had been the Tanzanians' main source of information. These apps were deactivated. So Samia Suluhu has to make sure that if really Tanzanians want to see free and fair election, media freedom should be actually upheld by making sure social media, no apps of any social media is deactivated, not only during polling day, but throughout, and even after polling, counting of the polls and whatever, and even a counting of the votes and announcing of the winners. Because if Tanzanians are the ones which have the mandate and the supreme kind of decision to make a decision on who should lead the country, who should be the leader at the constituency level, at the ward level, and the national level, then media must be free. Journalism has to be really objective. It has to do objective reporting to ensure that everything goes free and actually everything is, nothing is manipulated. No information is actually aired in favor of the regime in power. Thank you. I don't know if there's another question.
All right. Okay. Yes, there are questions. Thank you, Dr. Nkia. I don't know if Mheshimiwa Jussa, you are available now to take the questions that were directed at you. Some of them were very pointed in terms of what you are contributing now that you are part of the unity government. Karibu.
Asante sana. There have been like at least 5 questions put to me, and I'll start with those questions that were put forward by Bubelwa Kaiza. He put 2 questions. One was like, he asked that in my presentation, I mentioned that while election violence has been always a hallmark of Zanzibar elections since 1995, I mentioned that the 2020 elections were the worst because of the Magufuli factor, especially because I mentioned that he had his candidate he wanted to impose, and he asked me to shed more light into that. I think it is an open secret that because Magufuli himself said that his choice for the CCM candidate for Zanzibar elections was the current president, Hussein Ali Hassan Mwinyi. And actually, he even made it known that if he had a choice in 2015, his kind of preference for the running mate in his candidature for the union elections were 2 people. One was President Samia Suluhu Hassan at that time as a vice presidential candidate, and the second one was Dr. Hussein Ali Hassan Mwinyi. And it is known, again, it's not any secret, that the Zanzibar CCM wing were not in favor of Dr. Mwinyi. They had their own choice. But finally, it was Magufuli's choice that prevailed. So having made him the candidate for the party, his next project was to make sure that he is imposed on Zanzibaris. And he knew that given the nature of Zanzibar politics, it is always difficult for CCM to win an elections in Zanzibar, and it has been documented in many election observers reports, from the first one in 1995 to the last one before 2020, which was in 2015 elections, that CCM has not won an election. It has just been declared winner by its hand-picked electoral commission. So this time, as always the case, was even more difficult when you have already no popular basis, and yet you have your own party divided as to who they want to be their candidate. And that is the reason why he made sure that for the first time in the history of Zanzibar, the head of the Tanzania Intelligence and Security Services, TIS, was brought from the mainland. Normally, it is headed by a Zanzibari for the Zanzibari wing, but this time he brought someone from the mainland to make sure that his project goes on unhindered. But also, as I said, while we have always witnessed the deployment of army in Zanzibar, it was in such a big number this time that it became obvious for everyone. As I said, tanks were rolling in the Zanzibar streets, and even visitors to Zanzibar could see that. During the last week before the polling day, even during the opposition campaign rallies, you will see tanks going around the roads surrounding any of the grounds that will be we were using for election campaign. So it was open, and it was like very obvious for everyone to see. And these were the kind of splits within CCM. And Magufuli feared that the Zanzibar wing of CCM might not cooperate fully to campaign for his choice of the Zanzibar presidency, and therefore he had to use extra violence to make sure that whoever he decides is the president is declared the winner without regard to the will of the electorate in Zanzibar. This is what I can say. The second question was about the government of national unity in Zanzibar. And in a way, actually, it also goes to what maybe Neville Mena also asked. He asked that, or he mentioned rather, that ACT Wazalendo, our party, is part of the government of national unity in Zanzibar. And he asked, like, what are we doing about it? I think it is known that given the nature of Zanzibar constitutional setup, when you are a minority partner in the GNU, you don't have much influence. And this time around, given the way the elections results were announced, because we all know that the results did not reflect by any means the will of the electorate. They wanted to make sure that they dominate both the Union Parliament and the Zanzibar House of Representatives. It was believed by many that Magufuli wanted to amend the constitution to increase his term in office, and not having a two-thirds majority from Zanzibar would hinder that process of amending the Zanzibar constitution, or changing the Union constitution to remove the term limits in the constitution. And therefore, this time, he made sure that only 4 candidates from ACT Wazalendo are announced as winners from the Zanzibar constituencies. And as such, it left ACT with very minimal presence. Of course, we decided that we will join the government because at that time, there was no any rescue from anywhere. And the only way to put an end the violence that was still being unleashed against our supporters was to join the government and try to bring change from within. And I think that is one thing that at least was achieved at that time. Then that will also maybe answer Neville Mena, that the violence stopped. And even our leaders and members who are detained and we didn't know actually where they were abducted actually, were released. But that was the end of it. Now, coming to the question that Neville Mena asked, and I think it will also answer part of Bubelwa Kaiser's second question, what we are doing as ACT Wazalendo. When we decided to join the government, at that time, our leader, the late Maalim Seif Sharif Hamad, put forward 3 conditions to join the government, and they were put in writing. One of them was to end the culture of impunity by taking action against those who are responsible for the human rights violations, for the killings, for the abductions, for the maiming of opposition supporters and others. And we all know that Maalim Seif could not live longer to witness the implementation of this measure. But the new, of course, relatively new now, first vice president from our party, Honorable Othman Masood Othman, what he did in October last year was to unpack these 3 recommendations into measures that we in SCT Wazalendo would like to be implemented to make sure that we see the results or like fruits of joining the GNU. And part of those measures call for action to be taken, to use or to paraphrase what Neville Mena said, to ensure that justice prevails and justice is done to the victims of the state persecution and violence. And it touches about compensation, but also it talks about legal action being taken against the wrongdoers. So this is what we've done. And what we know from our own engagement with the president in Zanzibar is that it is being processed within the government machinery. But of course, we have set our own deadline within our own parties, and that, of course, I cannot reveal it here. But we know that if we don't see any tangible action being taken up to the time that we have set as our own deadline, we will go public and also try to involve other stakeholders to make sure that action is being taken before the forthcoming elections in 2025. And that would also like bring me to the last question posed by Musa Juma, who asked like, how is GNU performing? Well, there are still many questions, to be honest. But as I said, at least it has helped to bring some relative calm. I won't call it peace, because for us, peace means more than just calmness, actually, post-election period. So it has brought calm. And of course, during the period immediate after the elections, the violence stopped. That was still going on at that time. And those who are still in detention or abducted were released, including our then Deputy Secretary General, Honorable Nasser Mazrui, and 38 other youth from our party. But in as far as maybe bringing the reform that are required, as I said earlier, we still have a long way to go. What we in SCT Wazalendo are doing is to put forward recommendations that we'll put in public anytime soon, so that people could see what we think are the right measure that needs to be implemented to ensure that we are not going to witness what was witnessed in 2020 and even in previous elections in Zanzibar. And a final point outside the question that I would like to raise, I'd like to use this opportunity finally. I would call actually for the host organizations and those who are responsible for compiling this report to make sure that I think they meet both President Samia Suluhu Hassan of the United Republic of Tanzania and President Hussein Ali Hassan Mwinyi and submit this report. I think it is important that this report is made known not just by submitting maybe through sending it through maybe physical address, but to really seek an audience with these 2 presidents to put forward the recommendations and call for the authorities, both at the union level and Zanzibar government, to implement these recommendations. And I would think that would complement the effort that we in SCT Wazalendo are trying to do to make sure that reforms are undertaken, and that come 2024 for the local government election in mainland and 2025 for the general election both in Zanzibar and mainland, that we are not going to witness what we witnessed in 2020 elections. Thank you very much.
We are almost at the end, and I'm going to request Dr. Bisimba to take her questions and also to just perform the final ceremony of declaring the report launched. So Dr. Bisimba, if you can be very brief, please take your questions now.
Thank you. I think I saw only one question from Neville, which was about why the civil society was at least active during the hard period, but the media was not. I would say that civil society is a call, while media is a business. But also there are media which are doing their job well, but the problem is some of them were repressed to the extent of being banned, so they could not work. But for those who are around, most of them look at their owners. Who owns those for example, media outlets? Some of them are within the system, so it was not possible for them to do what they're supposed to do. And that's what happened. And some of the media also are waiting to be given some posts in the government. So you can just see how sometimes they are compromised to the extent that they were giving themselves punishment, and media decided to punish itself. But for the civil society organization, most of them who come up, that is a call for them. It is something they want to do. They want to do, whether they are provided with money or what, they will go on doing it. That's what I can say. But I think that was the only question I got. I don't know if there are others which I didn't get. Were there another question? Okay. Do you hear me?
I hear you, Helen, in the village.
In the village, you're here. What about the JFC Kenya? I can see he is talking, but I cannot hear him. I cannot hear you. I see you talking, but I cannot hear
Can
you.
you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yes.
All right. Daktari, nilikuwa nasema kuna swali moja where somebody had asked, I think it's Neville, alikuwa ameuliza kama civil society managed to keep working in the oppressive situation in the last election, unlike the media. What is an opportunity that the media missed, and what do we need to do to improve?
Okay, and I think I was trying to answer that by saying that at least the civil society organization are working as a call, while the media is a business, and as a business they have a lot to think about before doing what they're doing, but they missed the big opportunity, because the media, people trust the media, they listen to the media, they follow the media. So when the media is not doing what it's supposed to do, it is very, very unfortunate. And I think what can be done, we can try and have this very independent media. And when they are banned, people have to come up in arms to ensure that they are brought back, because otherwise we are not going to get the information we really need, and which is very, very important during elections and even during the normal days we are living in. So I think what the media need to do, we need to have also media like this, which are also part of the civil society organization. And unless media is the fourth arm of the state, if you become some arms of the state, it becomes very, very difficult to do what you're supposed to do. I think I'll say that for now. The other thing you said was that I should declare the report launched.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's time for you to perform that duty for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think, first of all, before we declare it launched, we have to really thank everybody, especially those who came up with that report and those who decided to make this event. And for everybody who participated in the event, I can see we have got about 45 or so participants and panelists, all of them, they did a very, very good job. With this good job, I think we have learned a lot about, of course, most of the things in the report are known, but they were known, but nobody had come out straight to show what is happening. But this is a very, very good thing. And I hope with this report now, because some people are asking How can we get the report? I think it can be online, and if the hard copies can be distributed. But first of all, we need to give this report to those who are concerned, especially those whose the recommendations have to be done by them. In the report, which says that we have to correct the wrongs, it is very, very important that everybody who gets the report take their role in ensuring that the report goes on, and many people try to do something so that coming the next election, we don't find what we found the last year. And somebody said about Magufuli thing, but it can continue because we still have those repressive laws, and we have some court orders or rulings which our government has not paid by the African Court of Human Rights. The issue of Media Services Act, some of the sections which are supposed to be taken away by the East African Court of Justice, all of those have not been done by the government. So I think if our government is so genuine, they should take the recommendation in that report, but they also are supposed to honor what have come out of them, court decisions, and also the Human Rights Council. There are a lot of recommendations which our government have been given. After saying that, I can now declare the report to be launched. We are now launching the report. It is being launched and it is now free for the report to be distributed, to be sent to anybody who wants to see, to read it. The report is declared launched. Yeah, I can see some clapping. Yeah, we can clap for that.
Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you, Dr. Bisimba. At this moment, I would like now to pass my vote of thanks to the panelists who have stayed with us and have provided such deep insights that enable us to dress this report and enjoy it or read it and understand it. Dr. Nkia, Dr. Bisimba, Mr. Jusa.
Thank you very much.
My brother
Thank you
Ansbert.
very much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for your service. At this moment, I would also like to thank the people who attended. We had about 60 people attending. I can't recognize all of you, but I can see there's Sarah Jackson, the regional head of Amnesty International for Eastern Africa and the Horn, Deus Valentin Roemamu of Center for Strategic Litigation, Irene Soila of Kenya Human Rights Commission, Tom Nyanduka, Commission on Human Rights in Tanzania, Cheryl Oyugi, Open Society in Eastern Africa. I also would like to just point out that this report would not have been possible without us undertaking what we like to call in Kenya regional solidarity, because the problems in Tanzania, the problems in Uganda, and the problems in Rwanda and Kenya. So one of the ways I think we are going to overcome the challenges that we experience in our local municipal jurisdictions is to have regional solidarity. So if Tanzanian colleagues are having a difficult time, Kenyan colleagues are having a difficult time, is also just to reach out to fellow Africans and fellow East Africans and speak to each other. I would like to also acknowledge the great work that was done in the background to get this done. We want to acknowledge very, very especially Roland Debole, the researcher in charge of Uganda and Tanzania at Amnesty International, for his background support to all of us. I would like to thank my colleague Aziza El Mamri. I would like to thank Ansbert once more, Sauti Kubwa. Kweli uko na sauti kubwa. I also want to mention my boss. I like to protect my paycheck. So I like to thank Rosemary Tolo and the leadership at Journalists for Justice, Thomas Rafus. I wish also to thank Kevin Otieno has been running in the background, but really the person who carried this event is Washeke Njoroge, my colleague at Journalists for Justice, sent out many invitations, and the unseen hand, the unseen genius who is working the online, Prudence Nyamishama, Thank you very much. All of you, thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of this. The report is now available on the link that has been shared in the chat box. We would like to continue to engage. Please, let's have a conversation about this. This is only the beginning, as Mheshimiwa Jusa said. This is only the beginning. We are only scratching the surface. We would like to go deep because each of those lives that was lost matters. Each of those injuries still pains. Each of those losses, of each of those transgressions on the freedoms of Tanzanians still matters. Thank you very much. We hope to continue to engage, and we will take on board all the very useful suggestions you've given about engaging the task force and presenting this report to the presidents of Zanzibar and Tanzania, and also to the Commission, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. I'm very, very, very grateful that I've had a very easy run here. We have overrun our time by about 15 minutes. Somebody still asking if we'll be able to access the recording. If you email Washeke, whom I think you emailed earlier, she'll be able to speak to you about that. Thank you. I think it's a good time now for me to depart. Bye-bye. Kwaheri sana, asante.
Asante sana. Asanteni sana. Mungu awabariki.
Thank you.
Wageni wetu, asanteni sana, tunawashukuru sana kwa maneno matatu.
Na mimi vile vile nawashukuru wote, asanteni sana.
Mungu awabariki kwa kazi nzuri.
Asante sana. Mjadala ndio umeanza sasa.
Ndio.
Mjadala?
Ripoti imezinduliwa, lakini inabidi sasa wananchi waione, waisome, waijadili, ili umuhimu wa ripoti sasa uzame kwa jamii inayohusika.
Na zingatieni sana hiyo, kuna mtu alishauri kwamba mwende moja kwa moja kwa Rais Salimia, mwende moja kwa moja kwa Rais Mwinyi. Kwa vizuri.
Tutakwenda, tutafika huko.
Mungu awabariki.
Lakini najua media zita take up the discussion from here, either kwa radio, kwa TV, kwa mitandao. Muwe available kujibu maswali ya watu watakaotaka kujua mnachotaka kufafanua. Kwa sababu na hakika sasa hivi tunavyoanza kuzungumza hapa, na hakika Clubhouse tayari watakuwa wameshaanza kuzungumzia hii report. Na wale ambao hamna ripoti, tumeambia tutawapa hiyo link, mtaiona. Nyingine iko kwenye website yetu ya Sauti Kubwa. Wengine tutawarushia kama tuna inbox zenu. Msome vizuri ili kila mtu aweze kuimiliki na kuifanyia
Yes.